Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you again. My name is Dustin Cormier. This is How to Rock Astrology. Today you are watching Pluto, the Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. Now, in my last video, we just did a little glimpse into the chart of Jeffrey Wolf Green. Today, you'll have to excuse my neighbor's playing the drums downstairs. It's an electric kit, and it's not loud enough for me to be like, it's ruining my thing. Gotta share the space. I'm also, if you're wondering, I've decided to not wear my shirt today. I'm like a little bit of a nudist in a certain way, but that's not really my purpose of doing this. I kind of just thought it would fit the Scorpio vibe of, like, you know, this lady, she's like naked, and it's kind of a liberation of clothes, and I don't know. So you can take that with however many grains of salt you wish. I'm Dustin Cormier, and I'm dying to get through to reading this wonderful classic book with you guys. Thank you so much for coming. Now, as I said, we just did a little glimpse into Jeffrey Wolf's chart, my own interpretation of it, if you're interested. Now, we are going to actually get into the book. This is Pluto, the Evolutionary Journey of the Soul, Volume 1 by Jeff Green. Now, before he starts, he has a little dedication to Paramahansa Yogananda. Dedicated to Paramahansa Yogananda, whose love, care, forgiveness, and guidance inspired this work. And to all of you who kept prodding me to get this book done, you know who you are, God bless you. And then he also has a special dedication to Noel Till. He has some acknowledgments in here, and, you know, I really love showing this because this really shows that he had a deep, maybe not preference, but a disposition towards Paramahansa Yogananda, who's a very important figure in my own life. This comes from Autobiography of a Yogi, which was Paramahansa Yogananda's book. This is the words of his guru. It says, a child is born on that day and at that hour when the celestial rays are in mathematical harmony with his individual karma. His horoscope is a challenging portrait, revealing his unalterable past and its probable future result. But the natal chart can be rightly interpreted only by men of intuitive wisdom. These are few. Swami Sri Yukteswar. He's the fellow who wrote The Holy Science. Did lots of cool, challenging stuff. He was, of course, a Vedic astrologer. And I myself am a tropical-based Vedic astrologer. So I love the fact that he puts such a deep emphasis on these gentlemen, Sri Yukteswar and Paramahansa Yogananda, because they are Vedic people, and it shows that Jeff Wolf has, again, a disposition towards the deepest depths of things. Not just astrology, not just karma, but what does karma mean? Where is it going? What's it for? How do we see it in the right context as a spinning conduit of bliss and suffering? And how do we redeem our suffering in the right way? How do we take the whole metaphysical grid and put it towards the proper sacrifice and the right enjoyment? You know, so he gets it from a very spiritual perspective, and he really gleans, like, the wisdom of gnosis he's aware of in his own sense of things. Whether that means to you the Egyptian alchemical thing, or the Christian Gnostic mysticism, or mysticisms of all sorts. You know, he's a Western guy, and he was well versed in these things. But I love that he was also well versed in the Eastern mystical psychology of Vedanta. I don't know how well versed, but at least he had the sense of it, and he talks about that in his book. Now, today, before we get into reading Jeffrey Wolf Green in his own words, We're going to first hear a little bit from Mr. Noel Till, followed by a large forward by Alan Oken. So, that's what we're going to be getting into right now. First things first, we're going to listen to the preface by Noel Till to the book. Starts off with this wonderful little image of Billy. Where is Billy? It's a good test question for an infant in the midst of self-discovery. But just where is Billy? Is he that which displaces a specified amount of space and or a specified portion of time? Or is he simply right here to be conveyed with some kind of impersonal gesture? Psychological tests of early concepts of identity suggest that the majority of Billies and Janes, of course, will answer this existential question by pointing to their stomachs, their midsections. Billy's here. As you listen to these paragraphs, ask yourself where you are. Say it out loud. What are your feelings? It's an awkward moment that can't be easily dismissed. So often in life, we reply to circumstances with the phrase or thought, who, me? Say this to yourself out loud right now, loud and strong. Who, me? Another strange feeling. Either you did make a gesture to accompany the two words, or you felt inclined to do so. A twitch in the wrist, perhaps. Where did or do you point? Where is me? It moves. Typically, kids point up a bit to their heart region, above Billy's stomach. Simply a corporeal centralization within adult anatomy, reinforced by psychological awareness of the indispensability of the heart, reinforced by the emotions that live in language and art, that refer always to the heart as being one's essence, etc. Pretty fundamental, though heady stuff. Nobody is pointing to their elbow or to their leg. If you were to ask this question of the universal super heavyweight boxing champion, he might reply, clenching and brandishing his right fist, "Right here, man." A full-time intellectual might not even articulate a reply, but simply point to his brain or blink his eyes, once with tolerance of the question, or to blink his eyes once with tolerance to the question. That's sometimes the grammar is awkward in these books. In either such case, something would be missing. It's the human dimension. And so it's fair to ask, what is it that is where I am, who I am? The questions that follow on rapidly are, of course, why am I? For how long? Who is responsible? Should this be pleasing to me or not? Etc. Nothing of this is new, but all of it is eternal. Religion was formed to answer such questions people couldn't answer for themselves, to tie things together for significance and security. We presume that within religious study, not just Christianity, mind you, the concept of the soul and the practice soul-searching were born. Even the most sophisticated etymological dictionaries cannot trace the word soul to a definite origin. It is obscure, just as the spark of life is obscure. Formal core teachings equate the soul with the essence of being, the total existential awareness of being. Although the soul is not a gland, a muscle, a complicated spiral of hormones and chromosomes, or even a problematic growth. Some so-called spiritualist practitioners in every age have tried to give it specific form. Interestingly, they would probably accept the proof of Billy's gesture or yours as validating the physical domicile for the soul. Why, it's the thymus gland, of course. That's funny. The thymus gland. It's like an Egyptian, that old Egyptian, the pineal gland thing. And then Alan Leo, for example, that gifted, strange, yet catalytic astrologer of turn-of-the-century England, whose work influenced mightily the very beginning of astrology in America, keys us into another dimension. He made quite a statement about the soul in relation to Neptune, or perhaps I should say he made a statement about Neptune that involved the soul in a very insightful way. What he said was, Neptune allows the soul to leave the body. Where is it going? Why? Where was it? Are we talking the sense of journey here? What he meant specifically was that Neptune underlined the difference between the tangible and intangible realities of our existence. For Alan Leo, the soul was intangible. It was an essence. In fact, when you get deeply into all of this, you sense that this leonine tie-up between Neptune and the soul was simply explaining the ultimate obscure dimension with the ultimate astrological dimension of that time. For example, part of the heavy baggage Saturn has carried with it out of past ages into modern times was taken on as the last outpost of what astrologers could see and measure. Everything left over went to Saturn. Karma. That's cool. All the residual pains, the hidden fears, and environmental threats, thus all the study of different levels, octaves, rulerships, etc. The discovery of Uranus freed things up, and the individual gained some respectability. But as well, the blame for everything left over from the symbolisms of those days was placed upon individualism disrupting society. Even with Uranus, there was still this me against the world, and Uranus causes me to be this individual that is going against the world. Oh, it always sucks that I'm this crazy person who has to deal with society, and that at the time was the limit of what these things meant. You had to confront society on a grand scale in order to get the greatest karma, and it was less about your internal experience of it. Then came Neptune. Where is Jeff Green? Is the question I asked myself as I watched this astrologer emerge in the world of astrology. I read some of his articles and interviews in several magazines. I attended some of his lectures, and I asked around. And then I discussed his new manuscript with him. Jeff Green was pointing to Pluto, to everyone's Pluto, to everyone's midsection, and saying it was where astrologers could begin to manage the mystery of soul, appreciate the sense of journey within evolution. As I studied Jeff's manuscript, I enjoyed great relief. Here was no spiritualist weaving spells. Rather, here was an extremely sensitive, spiritually eclectic, and psychologically sophisticated astrologer, working with the intangible world in a tangible way. Where attempts to discuss the soul in the past have always seemed to leave individualism behind. Alan Leo's struggle between Neptune and Uranus, i.e., there's no way to follow the dictates of the soul unless you put those above the ways of the world. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I missed that bracket there. I'm gonna start over here. where attempts to discuss the soul in the past have always seemed to leave individualism behind. Hence, Alan Leo's struggle between Neptune and Uranus. I.e., there's no way to follow the dictates of the soul unless you put those above the ways of the world. With all that in mind, Jeff sensitively dichotomizes the desire structures within the soul, within immutable consciousness. One desire is to separate from earliest origin, individuate. That's individuate. And the other is to return to the source, which is to be part of the whole. It's very deep. I want to digest that. So whereas attempts to discuss the soul in the past have always seemed to leave the individual experience behind, Jeff sensitively dichotomizes the desires structure within the soul, within immutable consciousness. One desire is to separate from earliest origin, that's individuate. And the other is to return to the source, to be part of the whole. Jeff then takes all of this insight and brings it down to Earth through Pluto's occurrence in the houses of the horoscope. Each placement is deeply, deeply studied in many dimensions, and each one is another finger pointing for the concept of soul. Here I am. A real test. As I was reviewing this manuscript, I received a particularly dramatic telephone call asking for astrological consultation. George was calling from a long distance, and his dilemma was extraordinary. George seemed extraordinarily intelligent, lucid, exquisitely aware, informed, and disarmingly open-minded. Part of his concerns was that he knew emphatically through substantiated visions, dreams, and auditory encounters that, in a previous life, he had been one of the apostles of Jesus. This is no laughing matter. Not even a smile could emerge in the telling of this state of affairs. So keenly circumspect was George in the discussion of his case. Indeed, such persuasiveness is often part of such a complex self-image. But to judge is not the role of the astrologer. Neither of us would have gained anything if I had given him the same doubting or flippant response that he got whenever he dared to tell a friend about his problem. The man's past life identity gave him problems in present life activity because of guilt and shame. He could not proceed with this life the way he was living it because everything he did appeared to be excruciatingly divergent from the standards established by the affiliation he had enjoyed in a previous life. There were many other details, but this preface is not the place for a case study. Upon accepting responsibility to try to help George help himself, I searched for a starting point. I needed to know more about the course of evolution within his life perspective. Jeff Green's manuscript at that time was 10 inches from my phone. I restudied a certain chapter, and the discussion of George's Pluto placement put me in touch with thoughts that turned out to be very helpful to this George person. Jeff's work pointed out George to George. It does the same for all of us as we catch up with Pluto's accelerated journey through space and significance within time. Congratulations, Jeff, and thank you. It's Noel Jan Till, McLean, Virginia, September 1985. It's a lovely little interaction between these two people. don't know too much about Noel Jan Till, but obviously he must be very important to Jeffrey Wolf, because Jeffrey Wolf mentioned him alongside Paramahansa Yogananda at the very, very start of the book. So I think that Noel Till gave much special attention and effort on the manuscript of the book that we're reading today. And that's very important. It's to help him wordify, to help Jeffrey Wolf Green translate properly into words that can be universally relatable to people. Ironically, like, if knowing that, it's amazing to think of what this manuscript would have looked like before he had touched it, because this book is already, can be so dense, and so many, like, the language is so transversal sometimes. It's almost seeming vague, as if it wasn't edited well. But that's not, I don't think I said that properly, because I love the way that this book is written, or else I wouldn't be doing this thing. It's just that the things that he's talking about would be hard to put into words. And I can tell that this editor, Noel Till, must have had a heck of a time bringing down to earth the things that Jeffrey Wolf Green intuited. Very cool. I digress. Now we are going to get into the second foreword to this book. Now, this next one comes from a fella named Alan Oken. Alan Oken is an important astrologer. I was going to do something like... I was just going to do a quick little lookup of what he's all about, just so anybody who's interested can kind of just get a glimpse of the nature of Alan Oken. He's an American astrologer, author of Alan Oken's Complete Astrology. He's a lecturer in astrology and metaphysics, an accomplished linguist, counselor, and teacher. And he's also an international traveler, a student of the works and teachings of the Tibetan master Dwal Khul. So, just to take a quick peek at his astrology chart, he's born 1944, which is the year of the monkey. He is also a Scorpio rising, so it makes sense. This is a, maybe you guys might want to see some of these websites actually give you a rating on how, like the Rodin rating. I think it might actually have it here. Data source, Rodin rating A. That's what I was looking for. Sorry about that. Steinbrecher being the collector. So, sorry about that. This is Alan Oken's chart, just so you can get a quick peek at it. Is also a Scorpio rising. Like, just like Jeff, he has Pluto in the 10th house. I would call it the 10th house in Vedic reckoning, because Leo's always the 10th sign from Scorpio. Only this time he has Pluto with the North Node and Jupiter. Pluto conjunct the North Node. A very interesting combination that we're going to read about a little bit later as we get into the book. I want to go back into this black and white so I don't look so, like, naked. Of course, I don't mind being naked anyway, so... So that's just a quick little glimpse of what Alan Oken's all about. American astrologer who was very similar to Jeff Wolf Green in terms of his astrology chart. Now let's get into what how he interrelates with Jeff. It's the foreword by Alan Oken. Forward to the text of Pluto, Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. Now, Alan tells us, as I read and reread the pages of Jeff Green's fine first book, Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul, I couldn't help but feel that an alternative title could be rendered to this edifying astrological work. That is, Astrologer, Come Home. Come home to the true reason for the practice of our ancient science and our incredibly beautiful art. Come home to the indwelling dedication to the service of our fellow human beings. Come home to the simplicity of the life which underlies the plan for the evolution of humankind. It's amazing that his Pluto and Saturn conjunction in Leo is in the 10th house, and that he is bringing everyone home to Pluto. Astrology is an aspect of the metaphysical tradition known as the ancient wisdom. When correctly practiced, this leads the astrologer into a direct awareness of the demonstration of the geometry of God. It then reveals that there's a logical, provable pattern to the unfoldment of human consciousness. Through his or her skills, techniques, and most importantly, his or her developed intuition, the astrologer becomes aware that there is an order to the seeming disorder in the world. What is more, that this order is measurable and predictable. Through the dedication to these studies, the astrologer then has the potential to become subjectively attuned and to the understanding that this is a living consciousness. That indeed the universe is alive, and that this life has a will, a purpose, and an intelligence, all of which are expressed in our solar system through the primary quality of love. This love is the true essence of all being and the ultimate evolutionary cause of incarnation. Pluto is called Minerva, and it's in its positive evolutionary aspect. And the name there relates to the M, Minerva, Mother Maya matrix, and Kundalini, and Krishna, I believe. With the notable exception of that most authoritative work, Esoteric Astrology by the Tibetan master D.K., through his amanuensis. I've never seen that word before. Sorry, but I'll start this again. With the notable exception of that most authoritative work, Esoteric Astrology by the Tibetan master D.K., through his amanuensis, Alice A. Bailey, along with the contributions of Alan Leo, W.P. Rigg, May R. Ludlam, the much-loved Isabel Hickey, and a very few others, there is a paucity of work on the more esoteric and spiritual facets of astrology today. Dane Rudhyar has made one of the most significant contributions to astrology, not only in this century, but in the whole of the recorded history of our science. Yeah, I get that. I'll agree with that. I know he's done a lot. Dane Rudhyar has outlined a philosophical frame of reference to bring to light the concept of the archetype of the Aquarian age, man and woman. This, in addition to his developments and discoveries in terms of delineation of the natal chart. Exclamation point. But even Rudhyar's last work, but even Dane Rudhyar's vast work, and the highly significant books by Mark Edmund Jones, has not satisfied the needs and interests of the metaphysically oriented astrologer, the seeker whose love of God and humankind burns more brightly than the greatest of ideas and the most refined of intellects. This is bringing in the yoga into it. Jeff Green's current work, as well as his teaching and lecturing, touches the core of the metaphysical seeker and the spiritually oriented humanistic astrologer. Jeff Green's work is part of a larger worldwide movement amongst astrologers to bring astrology out of a restrictive, glamour-riddled, personal power-seeking past. Pluto, the evolutionary journey of the soul, helps this collective effort by focusing on Pluto the planetary agent of transformation, in a way which, though esoteric in orientation, is nonetheless accessible to all serious students of astrology. Jeff Green's book has a unique way of combining metaphysical principles and laws, aids to the delineation of the natal chart, and distinct, clear insights into the workings of Pluto. This information is then presented to the reader in a language which is both reflective of Jeff's own metaphysical training and yet colloquial. It's his Mercury in the first house kind of coming through. His idiom, like Jeff himself, is conversational, friendly, yet deeply schooled in the classrooms of the ancient wisdom teachings. That's Jupiter in the first house. Powerful combination. Jeff is also a grown-up flower child, and the profoundly committed humanism of the 1960s is sincerely reflected through his teachings and in this current volume. In these respects, and in the arduous task of working for the reorientation of the personal life to the life of the soul, and thus the well-being of the collective of humanity, I am Jeff's brother. It is a joy to companion him and so many other brothers and sisters who share this orientation on the path of service through astrology and metaphysics. Wonderful. That's awesome. I will say to myself that I also will say hello to you as well on that journey, because that's kind of a nice, cool little thing that Alan Oken threw in there. As humanity progresses further and further into the age of Aquarius, the need to integrate personal apparitions through a collective focus of planetary participation will become increasingly apparent. It is by so doing that the new order of human expression will emerge. If enough love underlies this process, such an emergence will not have to be made over the ashes of the destruction of our present world. Wow, very heavy. Yet, destruction is a necessary part of resurrection, as anyone who deals with Pluto knows. Death, the needed vehicle for the consistent reincarnation, which constitutes so much of the inner structure of our planetary and human life. The non-regenerative emotional and mental habit patterns, the physical and non-physical toxins and blocks, and all other sins of separation that are so much a part of our karma, will have to be released so that the process of purification and rebirth may occur. As Pluto, the planetary agent of death and rebirth, passes through its own sign of Scorpio, we will see an intensification of this urge for the destruction of the negative, so that a greater future may manifest. As many of us know, this passage will take 12 years to complete, and will cover the years of 1983 to 1995. Dustin Cormier, I was born in 1991, when Pluto had already reached a third of the way through Scorpio at 20 degrees Scorpio. Saturn, Lord of Karma, is also transiting Scorpio through the end of 1985, so that Jeff Green's fine treatise on Pluto could not be more timely. Cool. It's also transiting Scorpio through the end of 1985. We stand at the cusp of two ages. Scorpio is the cusp of two frames of reference for human expression, the personal and the collective. Personal and the collective. It is through the sign Scorpio and the activities of the 8th house of the natal chart that a tremendous test of transformation takes place for each of us. It is here that the individual dies to the urge. Sorry, my writing's the writing's messed up here. It is here in Scorpio that the individual dies to the urge for the attainment of personal desires, as initiated through Aries in the first house, and is forced either through spiritual aspiration or material and emotional desperation to give up the attachment to the personal ego. It is here, in fact, that the personal ego dies to the incoming impressions of the collective focus of the soul. Libra, the previous test, has taught the meaning and the process of unification. Scorpio takes this one step further by allowing the now other realized individual to submerge into the waters of the collective life experience for the first time. This is really a big emphasis on, this book came out around 1985. So this is when Pluto was just entering Scorpio. So that is the reason why it's important in the context of the book, because this is the consciousness that Jeff Wolf Green was birthing here. The individual, So Scorpio takes one step further by allowing the now other realized individual to submerge into the waters of the collective life experience for the first time. That's where Scorpio, that's the entry into the other. The individual may then re-emerge with the potential for the inner awareness of the mystical union of self, other, all. Self, other, all. This process does not culminate, nor does it have the greatest potential to contribute to the material world, until the individualizing self is first bathed in the fire of a universal truth, Sagittarius. It is only then that such a developing self may manifest through the initiatic force of Capricorn. It is thus very important to emphasize that Scorpio and the 8th house are but the processes of transformation leading up to this higher state. Since the agent of transformation, Pluto, is indeed transiting this cusp of human consciousness in Scorpio, the entire body of humanity at the time in 1985 was currently undergoing the test of death and rebirth, and did so in increasing levels of intensity until the end of the millennium, the year 2000. Interesting prediction. It is very interesting to note that the crises of human existence on the material plane, which always lead to questions of deeper moral significance, take place through the lower octave of Pluto and the co-ruler of Scorpio. Note that Mars is traditionally known as the god of war. It's very painful to observe that humanity is not more metaphysically trained and oriented. It would then be able to stop the wars before they materialize by being able to create transformation on the more subtle planes of consciousness within, before their horrific material manifestations manifest. It is usually through the threat of tribal, racial, national, and now in our nuclear age, planetary annihilation that the catalyst for the evolution or devolution of humanity takes place. It is also a historical fact that all too often the excuse for war is based on the need and desire for territorial acquisition and other economic circumstances. And where in the horoscope do these circumstances lie? They are found in and through the polarities to Scorpio, Mars, Pluto, and the 8th house. That's Taurus, Venus, and the 2nd house. There is an underlying cosmic order here, demonstrable through the patterns of astrology. The chaos in the world is the product of the lack of awareness of the existence of such an order, and the unwillingness of humanity to lovingly obey and further that order all the way to the promised land called Earth. We continue to be such fools, such hungry children. We can and must change this unregenerative state of being. Consciously working with the energies of the planet Pluto, no matter how threatening to our egos, is certainly a way to manifest such essential growth. Lots of interesting points here. There's some very opinionated phrases in here. I'm reading it for the sake of clarity to the text. And I guess I'll just, I'll say my own bits once we get into the text. But it's a very interesting foreword by Alan Oken. He's got a little bit left here. Time and again, we precipitate our nations into the suicides of war as the only phenomenon potentially big enough to knock us into some semblance of sensibility. But even these all too numerous outer wars make very little impression on the positive development of the collective consciousness. No, it really is and must be the inner wars of personal transformation which lead us to that place of peace. It is at this inner and sacred place that the individual ego is transformed by its meeting with the soul. And it is the soul that is the place wherein dwells the master within each of us, the Magister Ludi. This peace is the one which passeth all understanding, for such a peace does not issue from the mind, nor from those spiritual leaders and heads of state who are exclusively mind-oriented. As Jeff Green says in this book, go slowly and let yourself meditate and feel the ideas. The feeling of ideas comes from the sensitivity learned through the identification of the ego with the soul. It is only through such a process of essential unification that humanity can be saved from its own total destruction. This unifying process is called the path of discipleship by the ancient wisdom teachings. It is my deepest prayer, my sincerest hope, and the goal of the work I share with Jeff Green and so many other brothers and sisters on this path, that we declare total war on our lower selves, using the weapon of unconditional love. May Pluto's atomic bombs of love burst open the molecular structure of the little egos so that the true light of the higher self may manifest through us and seed the present and coming humanity. It's Alan Oken, Santa Fe, New Mexico, January 1985. It's a little bit like heavy. I mean, like, he's right. Like, he's definitely, so many of the things he said there were spoken in the right, true terms. Changing times, the way humanity is right now, the fact that there's lessons coming from it and towards it. That was really good. I guess it's just that I guess I like Jeff Wolf Green's writings better. I'm excited to get into the actual writings that we all know and love. So that was the preface and the foreword to this book, ladies and gentlemen. I just realized my friend Chris R. was having a listen while he was working. Thank you so much for listening, Chris. Nice to have you here. As usual, folks, this is a live stream, so you can always feel free to make a comment. We've just done the preface and the foreword. Now, I'm going to have a little snack so I don't die. I'm suddenly starving. So I'm going to come back and we're going to keep rolling, folks. Let's shoot for like 7:05, possibly 7:10. we're going to get rolling, and we're going to get into the introduction to the book that we all know and love. Thanks for watching, folks.